Josh has been a leader in high tech for over 20 years, specializing in high growth phase companies. At SoundHound, he is the head of the Solutions Architecture and Engineering Department. In this role, he works with major accounts around the world to find an agile way to implement voice AI solutions in verticals such as enterprise, IoT, robotics, automotive, aerospace, healthcare, hospitality, food service, and more. He has also been involved in dozens of other tech startups and traditional businesses with roles including department head, CXO, investor, or board member. So let's give a warm welcome to Josh Judd, and there's somebody else on stage too. I'll let him introduce the new member.
So to clear the not an elephant in the room, is my dog. Not an elephant though, she's a dog. My dog's name is Canaloo, short for Canis lupus familiaris, being science nerd for dog. But she has nothing to do with SoundHound. So unfortunately, my company does voice AI systems instead of dogs. That would be nice, but high-tech dogs, not quite sure what that will be. That's my next idea. This talk is about, as the slide title suggests, why we think voice AI is going to be the next big thing in user experience that Agilists will have to pay attention to. Okay, so apparently my time is up. Bye. Okay. I'm not going to give a lecture on agile processes. I think probably a lot of people in this room are more of an expert on that than I am, and besides, you're getting content on that from many sources. It's more about how voice AI would influence those processes, why we think it's coming to the fore, what features you should look for as agile practitioners, how you will need to test for them differently. Test processes work a little differently if you're doing voice experiences versus typing or clicking on things. Is this a little too loud? Could you turn it? Oh, no, it's good? Okay. I guess it's just I'm in on focus. Okay. No, that's... Go back. Right. So emphasize which features an agile practitioner should look for in a voice AI system and how you will test them to make sure they're good as part of the rollout, but also how this will affect the writ large process of processes, if you will. I'll end with a case study showing how all of the things I'm going to say up to that point came together in a real-world project that my company launched over the course of the past 2 years, and show how the use of agile processes resulted in a pretty massive improvement in the product over the course of that trajectory. Every so often we see a big change in how people interact with devices, most recently touchscreens. Before that, there was, going all the way back, punch cards moved to typing on keyboards. Keyboards moved to using a mouse. Graphic interfaces, then color monitors, that was a big thing. Instead of having a monochromatic monitor, you could have fonts. Eventually touchscreens. Well, the next thing we see coming up is voice interfaces. Now, voice interfaces aren't new. They just have not worked very well for the past 10 years. Famously so. People would make fun of Siri on sitcoms. Hey Siri, call my mother. What movies are playing? No, not what movies are playing. Call my mother. Like, how did you get what movies are playing? But over the past few years, that's changed quite a bit as cloud-based AI systems have gotten better and better. So that's fundamentally why voice user experiences are proliferating right now, is because finally they work right. But we're not really guessing about the proliferation. My company builds voice AI systems, and we're seeing a massive and accelerating adoption of that technology. We can monitor Because we have a cloud-based system, we can monitor how many queries we get per week, for example. And that's on what we call a hockey stick graph. That is, it's gone like this for 10 years, and then now it's taking off like a rocket. There's actual exponential growth in customers using these systems. We're also seeing industry surveys reporting that more than 90% of corporations are expecting to deploy a voice AI system within the next couple of years. And with certain verticals like automotive that have a longer development cycle, it takes many years to get a new car model out. They're saying 90% of cars are going to have a voice control system within the next decade. This voice control system won't just do things like roll down the windows, it'll be a fully featured voice assistant. So we're building things for car manufacturers where you can order food through your car. You can say, find me a drive-through on the way to my home. Okay, I want to have an order ready for pickup when I get to that one, right? Please place my usual order, right? So much more intuitive experiences that don't require a whole lot of looking down at the screen from where you're driving or going through 20 minutes of menu navigation. You can just say, like, I want the same thing I always get, please have it ready at my usual restaurant. So as things get more useful to the consumer, and as companies want to make them useful to the consumer, you, Agilists, will have to figure out how to support that. But not just in a single interface context. And this is probably the first area where voice AI systems differ from other user interfaces you've dealt with. Companies are using an omni-channel approach to voice AI system. Omni-channel means all channels, intuitively enough, right? Because the voice AI systems are centrally based, cloud-based AI systems, if you build it right, it will be the voice experience for your phone system and your website and your app and your car. If you're a large car manufacturer, you will want to provide a consistent branded voice experience no matter which channel you're going in. So as an Agile practitioner, you might be assigned to do a voice AI project for a car manufacturer for the head unit. Just keep in mind that that same voice AI is going to end up being rolled out throughout their corporation, not just in that one application. So you need to check to make sure that it'll ultimately work, right? Maybe it's not, you're going to develop all of these channels simultaneously, but you do have to watch out for how they will work down the road. If done properly, this system should allow your customer to fully own their branding. This will include, for instance, making the actual voice of the voice AI system, the part where the computer speaks at you, use a custom computer-generated voice so that no other company will have the same tone of voice as yours, right? So an Agile project might involve not just code, but also working with human voice talent to record utterances that support this custom voice tone. Well, maybe a lot of Agile projects for user experience currently don't involve producing live talent-based products. So that's another thing that you're going to have to learn how to do is work with actors, to get the voice recorded properly. Also, how do you sequence these things so that the voices getting recorded to make the custom sounds while simultaneously doing the development of the logic of the system, so that the voice recording doesn't become a bottleneck in the process. You'll have to use a placeholder voice that functionally works the same way that the final voice product will work. Otherwise, you'll have developed a whole system and then have to change it as soon as your custom recorded voice is ready. So that's something to consider. Also, if your customer's goal is to fully own their brand identity, you want to make sure that the voice AI provider is supportive of that. So some of the big names in voice AI aren't. Like famously, the business model of Google or Amazon is to own the data, whereas the customer that you're trying to help implement this thing, they want to own the data, right? So understand how data privacy will work with your customer's customer. Voice data works a little differently than typed data in some countries. So will the voice AI system in the middle be retaining copies of what the person said? How will that interact with local laws about privacy? Because a lot of user experiences you work with right now are just running locally on the device, whereas this one has to largely be processed by cloud. If I say to a voice system, is it going to rain tomorrow? Having that entirely execute locally on the device isn't really possible because the head unit of a car doesn't know if it's going to rain tomorrow. It has to go out to the net to find that answer. Same thing with ordering food in restaurants, right? Getting out of a connected experience with the user interface is no longer an option with a lot of the features we want voice systems to support. That said, another, I mentioned ordering food. One of the categories of driver for adoption that we've seen is monetization, where your customer is, say, a large car manufacturer, and they want to implement voice AI in part so that they can get a cut of the revenue from a user saying, find me a restaurant on my way home and place the order for me, use my credit card on file. The car manufacturer will get a fraction of that payment if they run the transaction from the car's head unit. It'll benefit the restaurant owner because they won't have to answer a phone. They won't have to have somebody take a credit card at a drive-through window. They'll be able to process more people through their system more quickly. They'll have captured the money and won't have to worry about what happens when the person pulls off the interstate and sees a different restaurant. They've already placed the order, they've got the money, right? So this benefits everybody, but it benefits everybody at a cost to you, the Agile practitioner, of making this rollout process more difficult. Now you're not just worrying about voice AI and the user experience, you're worrying about how that interacts with multiple different payment systems. For instance, that example of placing an order to be ready at a drive-through, the car manufacturer is going to have to get a cut of that payment. SoundHound is going to have to get a cut of that payment because we don't work for free. The restaurant's going to have to get a cut of that payment. Those might go through different payment systems. So your project might involve figuring out how to calculate different cuts of a transaction, who they go to, and then making sure that the money is sent to these several different places. On the other hand, this has to be completely transparent to the end customer. The end customer doesn't want to know that like X% goes to me and Y% goes to the car company and Z% goes to the restaurant, right? So as an Agile practitioner, you're designing a test process to make sure that whoever's running it for real isn't going to know that it's happening at all, much less have to configure things in their car to support this. Another function of voice AI is figuring out what your real intention was. So if you're in a phone ordering system for a restaurant, we can conclude that anything that you say is probably ordering food. But what if you're just talking at the head unit of a car? You could be asking the car for food, or you could be asking the car about the weather, right? Or you could be asking the car about the food and the weather at the same time. So one of the things that you have to look at as an Agile practitioner is how do I test whether or not this voice AI system is going to figure out the correct context for a query. So you'll want to write test queries that are intentionally not in the domain that the system is supposed to support. Like, what happens if you ask the food ordering system about the weather? Does it actually know that you're not talking about food anymore and give you the weather report? Or does it just go, I don't know, like maybe raining, maybe not. We have many customers, like hotel chains, that want that kind of broadly useful voice assistant, and they want it to work on every device in their hotel. So yes, if you're in your room and you say, I want some food, they would want to connect that to room service so that some food shows up. But if you're in your hotel room and say, do I need an umbrella today? They would like the voice assistant to be smart enough to know that do I need an umbrella means is it going to rain? And be able to go check the weather report to find out if it's going to rain, right? And then deliver that answer to the customer. In fact, we have customers who want that to work on smart coffee machines, apps on the phone, again, omni-channel. However it is that you're going to talk to the hotel chain, phone, app, website, smart coffee machine, whatever, they want it to be able to support all of the voice assistant features, but also domain-specific functions of that device. The coffee machine should know how to make coffee, for example, but also know whether it's going to rain. So again, as Agile practitioners, you would want to understand, is this voice AI system just going to make coffee? I'm writing a test plan for light roast, dark roast, foam, no foam. But also, if it's going to support other things, what are all those other things and how can I test those? Also consider, even if the initial rollout is only supposed to make coffee, at some point, your customer is probably going to come back and say, now we want it to do the weather. So when you're looking at a project, look at all of these things. Can it support a branded experience for the customer? If so, how will we build it? How will we test it? Will it strengthen customer loyalty for your customers, right? This has to do with, is it accurate? Is it fast? Does it know all of the answers they're trying to get? So again, test plans that cover a wide range of capabilities are warranted here. What happens to the data, like customer privacy, et cetera? And is it customizable? Does it meet the spec that you were given for the initial rollout, and how will we change it over time? I guarantee you your customers, once they learn how this voice interface works and what are its other capabilities, are going to keep coming back to you and saying, we want another project, we want another project, we want it to do more. SoundHound's vision for voice AI is that it should not only be able to pass a Turing test and be as good as a person, it should actually exceed human capabilities. So, if you ask our system complex compound queries like, what is the weather like in New York, and can you tell me some flight options to get there? Well, that's two completely different domains of expertise. One of them is looking up the weather, one is looking up, flight plans. You want to start testing those complex compound queries and also follow-ups, like what is the weather like in New York, and can you give me some flights to get there? Okay, how much does the third one cost? A lot of voice AI systems will get confused by a follow-up question if you don't restate the original question. So as part of your test plan, you want to understand what kinds of compound and follow-up questions will be asked, and then test for them. The way we get to that in SoundHound is through ASR and NLU. Okay, what are ASR and NLU? Automatic speech recognition is taking phonemes, phonetics, like the individual sounds like e, o, u, right? And putting those together and figuring out what the word was. And then natural language understanding, when you have a bunch of words, you put them together into a phrase and try to figure out what the customer actually meant, right? So what words did they say and what do those words mean? This is a lot harder than people give it credit for. Classic example is to, and to. So I want to go to the store and I will buy 2 Diet Cokes because I don't want too much sugar. Well, that's TO the store, TWO Cokes, and TOO much sugar, right? Phonetically, they're exactly the same, but in terms of meaning, they're completely different. So a classic historical, I would say, voice AI system does ASR, comes up with a transcript, and then sends that transcript to a natural language understanding system. But the thing that's doing the transcript doesn't have enough information to know if you want TO, TOO, or TWO in any given case. So you end up with the transcript going to the natural language understanding system with a whole lot of errors in it, like TOO Cokes. No. TWO Cokes. So what we do is we create a feedback loop where we're continually cycling candidate possible translations, and we think it's TO, and our NLU system is continually running at the same time saying, you know, that really doesn't make sense in this context, maybe try again. And then the ASR system reevaluates its previous interpretation and says, wow, oh yeah, TWO, I guess, right? So as Agilists, you will want to test ambiguous phonetic words. Make sure you include things like to, there, THEIR, THERE, THEY apostrophe RE, to see if your decoding system is handling those properly. That's something that doesn't come up in click interfaces, it doesn't come up in typed interface, but it comes up just constantly in voice AI systems. All right, now, a case study. Putting a lot of that together in our restaurant voice kit system. Restaurants are one of the most difficult possible cases for a voice AI system. There's all that ambiguity inherent in the language, TWO, TOO, etc. But it's not really just the language, because restaurant menus are often multilingual. You might be talking about an American-based restaurant where everything is in English, but the restaurant's menu is sushi. So we're combining words and phrases from Japanese with a fundamentally English language transaction. So things are pronounced differently. But you also have to look at completely proprietary nonsense words. I want my fiddle-dee-diddle-dee burger. Okay, find that one in a dictionary, right? So how is it pronounced and how is it mispronounced? Because if it's a completely made-up word, people are going to say it like 50 different ways, right? So when you, as an Agilist, are testing one of these systems, you want to write test cases where the person testing the system intentionally mispronounces words. Particularly words that are made-up words or words in a foreign language compared to the rest of the product. Anyway, long story short, restaurants are really difficult because of multilingual or made-up word combinations, but also because they tend to be in very noisy environments where your microphone is going to be picking up many people talking at the same time. There can be a lot of background noise, like drive-thrus. There's engine noise or the sound of a radio playing or a marching band going down the street. Who knows, right? So as Agilists, you'll want to look at test cases for different acoustic environments, test cases for different types of background noise, particularly background noise that involves people speaking. Is the system able to figure out what is the relevant person speaking versus what is an irrelevant person speaking? So in this case study, we decided to start with the hardest possible case of restaurants, the drive-through. In a drive-through, you end up with a lot of times 2 lanes right next to each other where you're hearing somebody else's order like at a slight distance. You're on the street, so there can be somebody like, a protest rally with somebody with a loudspeaker, saying, "Down with trees," or something. I don't know, whatever it is you're protesting today. Sounds of emergency vehicles going by, sirens and whatnot. Somebody's playing the radio and it's talk radio. That's horrible. Like if it's music, we can filter that out more easily, but if it's talk radio, it's like, how do we know that that's the radio talking and not a human talking? So again, as Agilists, you're going to want to design test cases for all of the ways this could go wrong because of ambient noise. We decided to go with this as our first venture into restaurants because it was the hardest, and we felt that if we could make this work, we could do anything. The goal of the project was to be able to take voice orders in drive-thrus or on phone systems or in apps ultimately, or devices that sit on the table in a restaurant. Again, a loud, crowded bar, that can be a challenging environment. But the reason we wanted to do this is partly for the monetization reason that I mentioned. A lot of our customers want to be able to monetize the voice AI interface so that this project pays for itself. But also because, particularly when the pandemic happened, labor shortages became a thing, not wanting to interact in person became a thing. Like if you can talk at a computer, you're not worried about getting COVID from it, right? So that's part of why we saw that hockey stick thing. A lot of people suddenly preferred to interact with a computer instead of a person. But even, I guess we're saying post-pandemic now, even though, whatever, not going to get political on this one. In the world where COVID is less of a factor, we're still seeing massive labor shortages. People haven't gone back to work in the restaurant industry. So even if people could just say, I want to order from a human being, not a computer, there may not be a person you can hire to do that job, right? So it's becoming more and more important to be able to displace the non-existent human being that you can't find for love or money, right? This is actually a win-win if you do it right. It's a win for the restaurant owners because we can solve a staffing problem. It's less expensive generally over time. But also, if you want to change your menu or change your script, you can do it in one place and it immediately rolls out nationwide. You don't have to do a multi-month, multi-million-dollar training program to retrain your nationwide workforce in how to do the new menu. You just push a button when you're ready to go live with it. And for consumers, once it's trained and working right, it provides a consistent, repeatable ordering experience that's accurate. I don't know if any of you have ever had this experience, but if I go through a drive-through, half the time I have to keep repeating myself to the human being on the other end of this. They're not necessarily, you don't necessarily get the brain surgeons, on the headset, right? And then there's also, they have to deal with background noise. They're in a loud environment. They're barely trained on how to use their little punch screen thing. So getting a voice AI that does better than a human being in a drive-through is actually an achievable goal in terms of providing a superior experience for the consumer. So how did we approach this project? Well, again, I'm not going to get into Agile methodologies that you guys are already familiar with or consume from other channels besides me. Let's just say that we had a fairly normal engineering process from an Agile standpoint where we created, continuous exploration, continuous integration, continuous deployment. The process starts to become more interesting when you realize that it isn't one SoundHound product or one SoundHound process. It's a bunch of products and a bunch of processes all interacting at different phases of different Agile cycles. So there's the baseline voice AI cloud product that knows how to assemble English language and extract meaning from it. There's the restaurant-specific product that knows about menus and food ordering. Those are different teams running in their own individual Agile cycles, but the restaurant product runs on top of the continually being developed general-purpose voice AI system. Similarly, you've got rollout at a particular restaurant. Well, that restaurant has their own menu, they have their own payment systems. Well, that's an Agile team and an Agile product sitting on top of the restaurant voice kit, sitting on top of the voice AI system in the cloud. So how those things all interact can get fun. But in this case study, writ large, we chopped up the restaurant voice kit rollout into 4 phases for the initial offering. 2 drive-through phases followed by 2 what we're calling restaurants phases, like phone ordering systems, for instance. Again, starting with the harder thing and then getting gradually towards easier things. So the goal of this process was to break down each Agile sub-process into something small and achievable, again, that started with a complex environment, but a simplified application within that complex environment. Then get more complex interactions, but gradually simpler environments. So that's the writ large piece. But there's 2 fundamentally different aspects of that 4-phase process. There's the internal development. That's the thing I'm not really going to lecture about, just normal Agile R&D processes. The external effort is more complicated and more important because it repeats continuously forever. Once you've got the restaurant voice kit phase 1 working, you're going to roll it out at 10 different restaurants. Well, each one of those is going to have their own ecosystem of hardware and software providers, their own menu with their own weird words on it, right? So there's an Agile process for how you tune the thing for any given customer. As Agile practitioners, if you're working on a main voice AI system project, also look outward and see when this thing goes to the next phase, is there going to be an Agile process for adapting it to those other environments? Let's say that you're that hotel example. The hotel hires you to roll out a voice AI system for their TV screens so that you can order from room service. You want to know, well, okay, that's great, but you're going to want to do 10 other Agile projects after that. So, how are we going to make this work on your smart coffee machine or your, voice system? Because again, companies want a unified brand experience across all channels, the omni-channel concept. So for the internal development, as I said, I'm not really going to cover this in great detail. Concept, inception, iteration, release, maintenance. The only thing interesting about this is that this diagram is kind of wrong. This standard Agile diagram ends up launching, whereas we end up continuously recirculating. Like the project is never done. Because we're running the voice AI system in the cloud, we're continually improving it even after it launches. It may not be obvious to the customer that we're continually changing the system underneath their feet as they're walking, but we are. The external integration is a little bit different in that when it launches, it does launch. So you list out the product requirements for a particular restaurant. You figure out what pieces of code you're going to have to integrate with for payment systems and so forth, what third parties need to be involved. Ultimately, the iteration process is going to be between you, the Agile practitioner, two different payment system processors, the restaurant itself, the voice AI provider, SoundHound in this case. But one of the unique things that we learned from this case study is the actual end customer, particularly in food service, is not necessarily useful to the rollout process in that restaurant owners don't tend to be very technically savvy. So the actual end customer, in large part, doesn't get involved in the Agile process and doesn't want to know what Agile is. They just want people to buy food, right? So we're in the awkward place of having an end customer that we basically can't interact with in any useful way, right? And that's going to be the case with a lot of voice systems. You're not going to find that end customer that's a voice AI expert or wants to be one. They just want their thing to work, right? So again, this diagram for the external integration isn't 100% accurate in that after the thing launches, you immediately go into another cycle to improve it. When we rolled out drive-through phase 1 at White Castle, for example, we got it to the point where it worked and we launched it, so it did what this diagram says. But immediately, we're moving towards restaurant phase 2 or drive-through phase 2, right? And after phase 2 is complete, we immediately start on drive-through phase 3. So there will be a launch of phase 1, but then it doesn't really go off to the right as a done project. It just becomes immediately the next level of improvement to the project. So that's kind of the top level theory of things you're going to have to look for that are different in voice experience projects versus touch screens or mouse clicks. And how that can change the top level structures of Agile in some respects. But I thought I'd close with a couple examples of how our voice product looked at the beginning of that Agile cycle, and then how it looks now, just to show how the Agile methodology substantially improved it. And I'm not going to bore you with 20 minutes of playing a video at you, but I'll stop it and explain why I think various things are relevant at different stages. So this is phase 1 of our drive-through project in its early stages. This is what it looked like when it originally rolled out at White Castle. You'd pull up to the drive-through, you'd visually see the menu, but then you'd start speaking at it. There would be a wake word, so you'd say okay, I'm ready to order, or something, which I'm not gonna do in this example, but I'd like a breakfast sliders.
Would you like bacon or sausage?
Now, one thing you'll notice there is there was a pretty big delay. I want a breakfast sliders, figuring out what they meant. And then it said, do you want bacon or sausage, right? One of the things that we learned in this process is how to optimize the performance, to get rid of that lag. Another thing we learned is that you can't always get rid of that lag. So you're going to want to have a placeholder sound, like sound of typewriter keys or little clicky beepy thing so that people don't go, are you still there? Are you still there? And get confused. Also, you may have noticed follow-ups. So I want a breakfast sliders. I did not say I want a bacon breakfast sliders. I just said I want a breakfast sliders. One of the things you're going to look for in testing interfaces is incomplete or ambiguous queries. Make sure you write test queries where the customer didn't say the whole thing but did say part of it. You want your voice AI system not to just get confused and say, You want it to say, okay, I almost got it, but I need a little more information. So your test cases should both include the partial query and the full query. Like you want it to understand, I want a breakfast sliders and ask a follow-up, or you want it to understand, I want a bacon breakfast sliders and then not do the follow-up. Okay, that's something that we got out of the initial Agile process. You'll also notice that the voice doesn't sound all that convincing. I mean, it's, it still sounds like a computer voice. So as we moved forward to phase 2 of the restaurant ordering process, we improved things continuously as one does in Agile. Then we got into phase 1 of the ordering from a restaurant's phone line. This next video is the end result of all of that Agile cycling and what it sounds like now if you call a restaurant to place an order. Sorry, this is a marketing video, but...
Hi, I'm Linda, your SoundHound Burger automated assistant. I can take your order and I'll record this call for quality purposes. What can I get for you today?
Can I get a classic cheeseburger with cheddar cheese and no tomatoes?
Got it. I've added a classic...
So there you hear the clicky typey thing. Also the voice sounds a lot more convincing and there's also a lot less lag. So one of the things you want to look for as an Agile tester is, okay, how am I getting rid of the delay? How am I improving the voice quality? How will that change over time? Basically, the thesis, voice AI as a primary user experience is proliferating. I think I've explained why we think that's true. First of all, we see it empirically happening in the number of queries per second we're getting and the number of customers we're getting. But we actually think that it's a good thing, that human beings are mentally geared up for talking at systems. And the only reason we're not talking at computers like they do in Star Trek is that it just doesn't work right, right? So as this proliferates more, Agilists will have to get better at running projects where voice is the primary user interface instead of just a secondary way of interacting with the thing when you need your hands free in a car or something like that. And you'll have to plan how to fit Agile into those processes. As I said, centralizing your user experience is a good thing, but it does change how you have to think about the big picture of an Agile project. We at SoundHound make omnichannel sound easy because that's how our thing is designed from the ground up. But whether you're using our gizmo or somebody else's, even if your project is a single channel right now, you want to design the project with omni-channel in mind because at some point your customer is going to want that. And this omni-channel approach can also make ongoing support Agile friendly in that you can change it in the cloud as part of an Agile process and it will automatically roll out, nationwide within the customer when you do. That's basically the summary of it. It's coming, it's here, and you're going to have to plan for it. To learn more, go to these websites. Now, I believe I left 15 minutes for Q&A and general interaction, or are we at the end of our time?
Thank you, Josh. We're actually at the end of our time here, and we have a break coming up, so let's...
That's how we did it.
Yep.
Okay. So if anybody has any questions, you can ask me during the break. I knew there was 15 minutes in there somewhere. It's the break 15 minutes.
And I'll actually stick around here if you want to ask questions. I'll be a mic runner here, so otherwise it's break time. Don't forget to add your topics to the open session board, and you can exit out there. Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Any questions?
So you talked a little bit about like privacy and data concerns earlier. I mean, I know lots of companies, they're taking all this data, they're throwing it into the clouds for analytics. Is there anything they're doing to ensure that customers and users own their data and no one else is accessing that?
Yes. Probably shouldn't have deleted the microphone until after the questions. Yes. We actually have policies built into our cloud-based engine about what is your data retention policy, what is your agreement with your end customer, how long does your agreement with your customer allow you to retain the audio versus, I mean, you have to retain it at least for non-zero time in order to process the request, but can you keep it for a week for quality assurance reasons or something like that? So what you would want to do as an Agilist is understand how those cloud-based data retention systems work and are they compatible with your customers' requirements.